see how it came up to 1.9 million. That's something you don't have to provide right this second on the spot, but if that's something you can put together, that would be great. All right, thanks.
Anyone else?
Julie McGeehan, Oak Terrace, Lake Como. And you did make reference in some of your statements that it seemed like they were treating us either as an urban community, which this is not, and you even said that, or a suburban community. And this is not a suburban community either. What this is a teenage retreat for summer entertainment. That's what it is, from May until November. And if you're not taking into consideration the nuisance calls, I don't know what the definition of nuisance is, but when you get kids driving around throwing bottles out windows, trying to hit pedestrians, you get drunks coming out of these bars, starting fights with people, and if these are nuisance calls, then this town is going to go downhill. And it's not right that you're not making a personal effort to define this town and the needs of this town, not from what a book says. This town is unique, and you should go to Seaside Heights, you should go to Daytona Beach. Same thing. We have 5 or 6 bars in this town. We have 3 or 4 packaged goods in this town, and a lot of underage drinkers. And we have landlords who are absent. They have no idea what's going on. And I feel like I'm going to be victimized if we lose our department. So I don't think that you've tailored this to this town.
My name is Merrick Lipsky. I was here a couple of weeks ago. I'm the attorney for PBA 50, not just this group, but all the towns in the area. There was a lot of information, as we said earlier, so I'm trying to take my notes and digest a lot of this because, quite frankly, this is the first time we've had this much information. Mayor, last time you said there was supposed to be a transparent operation and as much information is out there as what we're getting. But obviously this was being put together and it wasn't done yesterday and we haven't seen any of this.
This is the first time that the council's seen it. I'm prevented under the Open Public Meetings Act. I'm sure you appreciate that from discussing it and disseminating it. This is the first time that anyone's seen it.
Well, that's generally true, but when there's negotiations between the union and the borough, revenues and taxes are often discussed. That's not part of the Open Public Meetings Act. Those are things that are normally discussed, and quite frankly, this is the first time we're seeing it. Looking at some of these numbers, the only numbers we were discussing up until this point was the $600,000 number that was put forth to the state. As we discussed last time, and you discussed, that number was actually high. It was actually lower because a couple officers left, but we didn't have the exact number. So as a PBA, we've been operating under, well, it's a few $100,000. Maybe we can make up that. Where is it? Maybe there's things that can be done. Now we're just throwing a whole bunch of numbers. I'm looking at a $1.1 million difference here. And for the life of me, quite frankly, I can't figure out, they're nice numbers, they look good, it sells good, and everything's gonna cost a lot more money, but looking at 6 numbers on the screen, it's very difficult sitting here out in the audience, I don't think it's just me, to figure out what the first number is, how we got to the second number. I think from what was stated earlier, is that this is an optimum number if, I think, 4 officers were hired. Is that correct? Or?
It was based on Mr. Riccardello's staffing recommendations. So I think it was a total of 13.
I think it's based on $911,000 savings.
We'll get to the savings. I got a lot of questions on that as well, but I'm just trying to figure out how we got to the budget number. Because what we had discussed was that we needed 4 officers to go up to 11. Now I'm hearing 13 as an optimum number. The question is, what can the department operate under at an effective level? And I don't believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's been no discussion with the chief of the department himself to practically, as the lady, ma'am said, I missed her name, has said a few minutes ago, this town's unique. And I think just going off of the best practices studies number doesn't bring in the day-to-day operations of the department. Would 2 officers sufficiently staff this department at this time so that we can get through a hump, and hiring 2 officers at a low level, not the same as having 2 officers at top pay who left. And quite frankly, I don't know what this number represents up here. You know, like I said, I have there's a lot of questions here, but when you were when you were going over some of these numbers, you saying they only gave me May through December for the CAD entries, for example. I'm sitting here saying, who's the they? I can hear you, I don't know if everyone else can.
That came from the dispatch. We actually have a raw document that they gave us. And right on the raw document, it tells you self-initiated and then citizens calls. So that's where we got the information from. It came right off of a document that we requested.
Okay, then, so we're working with only a part of the year, not the whole year. I don't, quite frankly, understand why the whole year is, especially, why wouldn't the beginning of the year be available when the end of the year is available? It seems a little odd to me. The CAD entries, as you're familiar with being in police departments, I mean, those are maintained, they have to be maintained. They're very specific for people in the audience who may not know. There's times of the call, times the calls went out, times the calls were closed. And so when you were saying that you're using this average of 30 minutes, because you just don't know,
Right.
And then you said how small the town is, maybe it's 10 minutes and not 30, maybe it's 12, maybe it's 40, but it's a guess. And that information's available, and I think that goes a long way towards your guesstimates as to how much it costs. It sounds very bad when you say that a stolen bike costs $40,000.
49.
Okay, but that's based on a lot of estimates that you're making. A lot are put into those formulas.
Counselor, I would be glad to regurgitate the numbers if the chief could give me the actual information. And then I would restyle it again.
Okay,
But I can't seem to get that.
Well,
I can't even find out how long they're on the job for.
Those numbers would do the same thing the PBA does. We have to file OPA requests for everything. I'm not saying that's the best way to have to do it, but those numbers are available. There's a lot of jobs on the line, there's people on the line. I think it's worth going through that process.
I can add that they switched the CAD system. And that was, I believe the data was not kept or recovered, so that was the data that was left after the switch over to the CAD system.
Well, maybe, that's the first I heard of that, because from what I heard that information is maintained in times for calls, something that's usually very available when looking at these systems. And the concern here is this, on your agenda for tonight is pushing through the layoff notices. That say 45 days from when these notices go out, layoffs can start in the whole Belmar can take over police services. And I just feel, looking at all this and seeing what's going on, it's going very quickly. If information is first being put out tonight, and the layoff notices are first going out within days or however quick they go out, that's almost it's very little time to review it. At that point, the only option we have is an appeal through the state system on the layoffs and everything else. We're not actually addressing the problems going on. I can sit here and list off a whole host of things. You said the ideal number of how departments operate. I don't think there's a department in the state of New Jersey that operates under the ideal number. The state police, where you're taking all these numbers from, are 500 men down. So nobody operates at this perfect ideal number. I think the question is, what's the number that can realistically be used for staffing that this department can operate under? If we hire 2 people at the lowest cost through this year, these numbers are greatly inflated. And of course they look great for wanting to give the services to Belmar to show to the audience here, but they're very inflated using optimal numbers. And I don't think those are the ones that should be presented.
Well, why would we want to use less than optimal numbers?
Because it's not reality. Everybody would I'd like to be driving a Rolls Royce tonight, but I'm not. I'm driving a Ford. The bottom line is, Every department in the state of New Jersey is below optimal numbers. So why would you try and sell the public on that's the only number we can operate under?
Because that's the number they deserve.
And if you listen to our residents, many of which have come up and discussed the problems during the summer and the issues that go on during the summer, I think that calls for more officers. That's what I hear from the residents.
So we're gonna have more officers from Belmar than we're gonna have if they worked here. I mean, obviously more was always seems better, contrary to what Mr. Richardell said. I believe more is better, but getting rid of them and needing more, I don't see that correlation at all. Not having a detective is because one of the officers left because this was gonna happen. So he left to go to Belmar. If we hire 2 more, maybe you have that detective back here who can cover those 41 calls that you discussed. I just think there's many options out there, and part of the view of the police department now is because this discussion's been going on, so certain things haven't happened. Negotiations with the PBA haven't happened. For a little while there, it sounded like a lot of PBA union bashing, saying all these great benefits everybody has, but it's consistent with everybody else in the area. It's not it's not like Lake Como's got this great system and everybody else is getting nothing. And that's all negotiable. We're in a contract here. And I've been in other towns all over the state where PBAs are very reasonable. And if there need to be cuts for the real reason of saving jobs and saving a department, we've done that. It's happened in many places. And we're not under a contract right now this year. So this can all be cut. If we're talking about saving $300,000, that's one question. And quite frankly, that's where we were operating under based on these numbers that have been put out. I'm looking at $1.1 million. I'm kind of like you guys probably. Or where are we coming up with $1 million? I don't know. And now I see today that the proposal from Belmar is for $1 million when the number that's been floated around was $500,000. May have been rumor, may have not been right, but that's kind of the lack of information that we had. So now we see that it's $1 million. Why does any town take over police services? Because it's going to be money in their pocket. Once you close the police department, and I don't think you'll disagree with me, it's extremely hard, if not impossible, to reopen the doors of that police department. So it's a very big step. So if Belmar in 2 years from now says 900,000 isn't cutting it, we need 1.4 million. The town here is stuck. Nobody else even gave bids back. So it's dealing pretty much just with Belmar. And they're going to have the upper hand, like anyone in negotiation. They want more money. That number's going to jump once the contract, whatever the period is, that ends. And there's no way to bring this department back, because that would be too expensive. Coming up with ways to fix it can be done, but trying to create a police department once it's gone, that'll be gone forever.
Council, I'm not going to get into negotiations or discussions we had with the PBA. That was something that we had discussions several months ago. With regards to the detective, he was put back on the road because we didn't have enough. We are continually one workers' comp case away. We are sick leave away. We are a whole host of reasons that we were continuing away from financial crisis in the Lake Como Police Department, which is just too small to operate that level. You need more officers to do it. The only way you do it is on the backs of the residents. So the things that you were proposing that have been proposed in the past were inadequate. It was not putting the department where it needs to be and not giving the services to the residents that they deserve.
If you're saying it's on the backs of the residents, maybe some of the burden does have to be borne by the residents. The problem is, these numbers, I believe, are very inflated and are not giving the proper information to the residents. I think if people need to make a fair decision and evaluation of whether they want to pay more taxes, on whether the PBA wants to take cuts in their contract, and how much money is actually needed, I can't do it from made-up numbers that change every week. It was $643,000. It was then probably a couple $100,000 left with 2 officers that left. That may change a little with 2 young officers being hired, but those numbers can be figured out. It takes a little work, but it can be figured out. These numbers are just greatly inflated, which makes it seem like no matter what we do, we could never come up with 1.3 million.
If you put out the levy cap referendum and you don't do enough, you're back in the same position the following year. and the year after that, and the year after that. If you're going to fix the problem, you need to do it once and for all. You need to build it in, because that becomes your new base. I've said it continually. You will be back in this position year after year, and I, for one, I'm sure the PBA don't want to do that.
How about when you have to raise taxes because the contract goes up with Belmar, and then there's no negotiating, they'll have you between a rock and a hard place because you can't answer that. And, you know, there may be a good relationship now, in 5 years, maybe there's not a good relationship. You can't read the future like that. At least with the union here, there is a relationship that can be worked with.
In your opinion?
I think in my knowledge.
Okay.
You know, I'm not going to go through all the questions. I think I made my point. But as far as the people here are concerned, I think you people need more information before you jump on board.
Just please address the body of Curtis. Thank you. Anyone else?
Bob Rumsby, 18th Avenue. Mr. Allison, may I ask Mr. Allison some questions? You gave some great history about the accounting in the town, and if I recall, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems that 2011 seemed to be the year when we started to take the money out of the reserves that were built in. Am I correct?
That's when it started to dwindle because 2010.
Hello?
Yeah, okay.
2010, 2011 was the last year we were getting that extraordinary aid. As I said, previous to that, the state was routinely giving us somewhere between $300,000 and $400,000 a year. We would go to Trenton every year and say, hey, we got a shortfall in our budget, we can't make it, we can't tax the people anymore, and we need aid. The state at that time was able to give us that. The state has cut that off now. So that lifeblood is over.
And it seems, if I understand you correctly, the subsequent years you have taken from the reserves,
Basically, yes.
Or you've had some accounting changes, practices.
There's been the dwindling of the surplus. There's been efforts for one-shot revenues that came in that we were able to patch it up. But by the end of 2014, we had no surplus of cash.
So I'm more familiar from a public corporation standpoint, not from a municipality. However, you're the expert in this field. Would you issue some kind of exception notice when you certify the annual report from the town?
No. You're talking about going concern?
Yes.
No, it's not a going concern issue because of ad valorem taxes. Ad valorem taxes is that the council is able to tax. If they need revenue, they can tax.
But they can only tax up to the 2.5% cap.
That cap has been instituted for a few years, yes. But each budget year, they can make the decisions to, it's not a revenue issue on their part, it's an expense issue. So there is no going concern issue because they could always cut their expenditures, which is what they've been doing, but have gotten to the point of where it can't go anymore.
Well,
So the answer is no, there's no such thing as a going concern issue in a municipality.
okay, but except it's not just a revenue and expense issue. Okay,
It's not a revenue and expense issue?
No, if I understand it correctly, because of the cap A on the revenue side, and on the expense side, it's been putting the finger in the dike because of using the extraordinary funds or the reserves.
That's right.
Correct?
Correct.
So, I have a little feeling for the people here that are now responsible for it, that they came into a position not knowing fully the financial stability of the municipality. And the problem is now...
Well, the budgets, the audits and budgets are online and are available at town hall.
Are the reserves and all the balances
Sure.
and sheets? Well, then I don't think the 1,700 people in Lake Como had, the time to go through everything and say, wait a minute, that line could be a problem long term. The point that I'm getting at, to put it, in a summary basis, is now it's a problem.
No, not now it's a problem. It's been a problem for a number of years. And it's been known for a number of years, and the governing body has known about it, and it's been discussed at budget meetings that I've been in every year, saying we're just scraping by this year, we have this issue. I know I've heard it for the past few years.
The problem has surfaced mainly because the state is no longer giving us subsidies to towns like Lake Como. Correct?
That has certainly exacerbated it.
Right. Lake Como is not the only town that's not receiving this, I assume.
Not every town got extraordinary aid. This is extraordinary aid that we would go in for. Not every town goes to Trenton annually and says we need more money. Lake Como has done that for as long as I can remember. So they've always had a structural imbalance in their budget. For the most part, they have never taken in enough money to pay their expenses through their regular channels of taxation and the fees that they collect. So they would have to go to Trenton to get extraordinary aid. The policies of Trenton have changed. Trenton no longer gives extraordinary aid. They, however, will consider transitional aid. And transitional aid is just that. They may say, you know what, you have a budget shortfall this year, whatever it is, $300,000, $400,000, we will consider giving you that money. But two things are going to happen. One is you have to put in a plan that you won't have that money anymore, or that you won't need that money anymore next year, or possibly the year after if it's a 2-year transition. And if we give you that money, we are going to ostensibly oversee you. We are going to monitor everything you do. You want to hire someone, you have to go through us. If you want to buy a truck or bond, you're going to have to go through us. So there is state oversight with regard to that, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But when we went to the state last year and they looked at our budget and we talked about discretionary aid, they said, well, in the future, if that's something which we would consider giving you, in looking at our budget, they realized that roughly 50% of the expenditures of the budget is the police department, and they said that's where the change has to be, because there's nothing else that's anywhere else, unfortunately.
Are we applying for the transitional?
Yes, we are. This week we are going to apply for both transitional aid and to put the referendum on the budget, because we have to do this collaterally, and if we need to do one or the other, or neither, that's something existing progressive.
So would that give us jointly enough time to make that 2016 referendum number perhaps a little more realistic to what we need?
No, you can't get both. In fact, what will happen is if you're going to go with the referendum, the state will hold off on making any decision on transitional. Excuse me. That's it. on transitional aid, because they will say, well, let's wait to see if the referendum passes. If the referendum passes, we'll have a lot of money, because we're going to raise $3.7 million. So the state will say, goodbye, you have now rectified your problem. If it doesn't pass, then we will ask for discretionary aid or transitional aid in order to patch this year. And if the referendum doesn't pass, then more than likely we'll go with this arrangement.
Well, then, to me, it seems prudent to then go for the transitional aid for this year with the police force the way we have it today, and will give us 12 months to figure out if we do have to do a referendum in 2017, it gives us something to get our teeth around.
I don't think there's anything to figure out with regard to the numbers. I mean, you will definitely have to do it. I mean, that would just be kicking the can down the road.
That's essentially
That's what happened last year, actually.
last year, and the state said no, because you need a plan in place to show them how you're going to alleviate the issue. And I went to the state, and the state recommendation for us was to disband the police department and send the RP out. So that's already happened once already. That was last year.
Do we have other options to look at besides just having the police department take the 100% burden?
Like I said at the last meeting, you know, we certainly Louise and I looked at every aspect. The total salaries for all the workers in the borough, except for the police department, including the mayor and council, and the part-time code enforcement, are 741,000. So you would lay everyone else off, and you'd be left with the PD. That it's not even enough money to do it, but conceivably, it's impossible to do.
So in essence, the transitional aid is not available to us.
Not unless we institute a plan to put the borough on a sound financial footing going forward, which, according to the state who gives the transitional aid, is to contract for police services with Belmar.
So they're mandating that we have to contract with police services, not that
They're not mandating it. You could raise your taxes to pay for it.
No, I understand that. Then you have the referendum. I'm looking at middle ground of saying if we had a realistic, not realistic, what we could pay for with the police department for this year, and if that number was somewhere between the adopted budget and the 2016 referendum number, and yes, maybe it is not the optimal number that Mr. Riccadelli recommends.
The council will have to adopt a budget by law. That'll start essentially next month. And they're certainly free to adopt whatever budget they so choose. It's going to be above the cap, and whatever that number above the cap would have to go to a levy cap referendum unless they got transitional aid to get it below the levy cap. Keep in mind that we got it below the levy cap last year, and you had a 9-cent increase, which was $500 per household. The average household, $400,000 household, plus you had your $300 water bill on top of that. So add in your other taxes. It's significant, even below the cap. It's a significant number. So yeah, the council could make changes to that number. Again, I appreciate council for the PDA's thoughts on the matter, but just in my experience, this is my second year as mayor, you can't run the town the way we've been doing it. When you look at the numbers, the police department was continually essentially hemorrhaging money, and you would take from all the other areas to pay for it, and that's what we did. I mean, no one wants to get rid of them. I don't want to get rid of them. This is the toughest thing I've ever had to do, but when it boils down to it, we can only kick the can down the road so far. I'm the fifth mayor to have to deal with the issue, and I can tell you it's not getting better. You do a simple Google search. Senator Sweeney had comments that you wish they had a 0% cap. So forget about Lake Como having problems at 2%. You go to 0%, Belmar's going to have problems. All the small towns are going to have problems. So it makes sense from a global perspective that the small towns, we line up at our own choice, not when the state comes in and tells us to do it, because that's coming. They're going to come in and pair you up whether you like it or not. And quite frankly, I'd rather do it on my own volunteer decision than have the state come in and tell me who I got to pair up with, because then you really have no say in it.
Well, and again, I appreciate your position, and I agree with you. We would rather do something from the town, not being mandated from the state, which is again why I just asked the council to reconsider looking at the 2016 referendum number and to see if there is some middle ground we can reach. And
I have no doubt that they will do that. There'll be public hearings on the matter. And listen, we value your input on that. I can tell you in the 10 years that I've been around, the budget meetings are sparsely attended. No one wants to put the time in. The budget sits on the desk. No one picks it up. It's online. I don't know how many people read it. They certainly complain about their taxes after the fact, but no one puts the time in except the council. And, we're essentially volunteers. So, we do the best we can. So you got a stake in the game. You have to invest the time. And they'll certainly listen. But I can tell you as mayor, I'm not going to recommend a bare bones budget in the fashion that we would continue. I can't run it down that way. You have people who still have yellow water. That's a third world problem. We have a third world problem in Lake Como that the residents still have yellow water. We can't pay for it ourselves because we vanquished our utility surplus, so we have to rely on grants from the government to get that done. Who didn't have complaints about the snowfall? We couldn't get Main Street plowed. The plow broke. We have 4 DPW guys, they can only plow for so long, the plowing wasn't getting done. So you can't shoestring. At least as a resident, I don't want to shoestring. As a mayor, I can't. It's no way to run a town, so you can't just say, okay, if we squeak this number here and lower this down and have 1.5 cops instead of 4 more cops. It's no way to run a town.
We have a lot of very smart financial people looking at these numbers, so it's not like we're just not seeing something. It's there. There's, like the mayor said, there's not a whole lot of wiggle room at all.
No, and again, I appreciate, and I have a feeling that your budget meetings will be a little better attended, and you know, people will have an interest. And you know, Lake Como is a unique town, and I'm sure Mr. Riccadelli will have an appreciation for that. It has unique problems. I've seen the police force. I've seen how they work with the people in town, how they take a potential problem and smooth it over. So yes, I'm a little prejudiced towards that and would like to maintain that relationship. And that's the relationship the council has given the police department, that mandate to have that relationship. And we just don't want to lose it. So whatever we can do, let's do it. Thank you for listening to me, and let's see what we can do. Thank you.
Hey, just come to the mic, Tony, I have a question. Mr. Smith? Tony, I'll get to you next. Just say your name and address.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Dave Smith. I live on 19th Avenue. I'd just like to say before, I have a couple of questions for Mr. Ricardella. And first of all, I think we need to acknowledge that our police department does a damn good job in this town. That said, we've got a heck of a problem, and I think we've got to recognize that the mayor and council are trying to work through that. And so I think we need to be careful talking about numbers that came out of nowhere and whatnot. I think these people are trying very hard to figure out what we have to do, and that's why we're all here. So thank you also to the mayor and council. Mr. Ricardella, if I may, I have a few questions. I'm sorry, I don't know this lady's name, but she made a point about the stuff that goes on around here in the summer. It's not, it's not NYPD Blue, it's not, sure. But throwing bottles, 4 o'clock in the morning parties, drunks who may become violent if somebody doesn't try and de-escalate the situation, that is a reality in this town. And if I understood you correctly, and if I'm wrong, please tell me, but there were 41 major, or at least the way they're classed, I don't know if the stolen bicycle falls into that category, crimes in this town. Fortunately, they weren't violent, which is why, by the way, I think many of us live here, because we don't have to put up with that. And you're unable to find the numbers that would pertain to these other less, and I don't know the right terminology, but all the other calls that the police have to do. Wouldn't it be possible, it seems to me one of your calculations came out with 1.4 officers, another calculation came out with 3.9 officers, depending on how you do it, that we appear to have the 41 calls for major things. We don't have the actual times, but we appear to have a number of total calls. Wouldn't it be possible to recalculate based on maybe some interviews with police officers? Because I'll bet you they spend a heck of a lot more time on, let's say, a fight with a bunch of drunks outside a bar than they do on a stolen bicycle. And that may statistically not come out as a major thing, but I've watched cops on Main Street stand there for 2 hours trying to de-escalate a situation with 2 guys, which in the end protects everybody because you don't know what those 2 guys are going to go and do if they just got pushed down the street. Wouldn't it be possible to come up with something that is not 1.4, not 3.9? Maybe it doesn't get to the numbers where we are here, but at least for the sake of considering this, that we get a more realistic number that includes those kinds of calls and that kind of duty?
Well, we asked for the information from the computerizing and dispatch, and this is what the police department provided us with. We have to work with the raw data that's provided to us. If you're saying the raw data is wrong, I'd be glad to look at it again. I'd love to know how long the response time is. Counselor brought up before, we don't know how long it takes to get to the job, the response time. We don't know what the total time is being spent on the job. That information should be someplace in the CAD, in the police department's computerized aided dispatch. And I would be glad to revisit those numbers.
Well, it seems to me we need to get to the bottom of that, because I think they spend a lot of time doing those things. Okay, second question is, at the very beginning of your presentation, you kind of glossed right through a statement which struck me as a little odd, that more police officers do not equal less crime. I certainly understand that in a sense of piling on another officer, at some point you get to a point of diminishing returns. But it seems to me that it defies the common sense of just about every town, every state, national government, that more police officers don't in some way deter crime. And you take a town like this where we do have a lot of teenagers, 20-somethings, and by the way, some very big teenagers wandering around, potentially making trouble. Can you really say that the police car going by every few minutes doesn't actually deter problems?
I would say that high visibility patrol and strong traffic enforcement is a deterrent to criminal activity.
And then just finally, I know you can't predict what, if this were to come to pass, this working group that would take in the mayor and some members of the council, and I guess the mayor of Belmar and some police chief of Belmar. If I understood your numbers correctly, it seems that Belmar would need some additional officers to cover the additional duties that they would have to take on. From your experience, I know you can't predict the future, what's going to happen with Belmar and Lake Como, but from your experience, would the, let's call it the gaining police department, take on some of the officers from this area, if you know the area?
I don't know if that's in the cards, or that would be up to Belmar, whether or not they want to take it. I don't know if Belmar would accept the officers or not.
Thank you, Mr. Ricardo. Mr. Mayor, thank you very much.
Ma'am, I promised Mr. Maselli that I would take him first. But, you know, do you mind if she comes? I'm sure you have multiple questions, and she...
Debbie on New Bedford Road. Just wondering if you could provide some background and information on the, it's definitely Belmar, and how did the RFP process go?
An RFP to essentially anyone who was willing to respond. We did hand deliver to the 4 adjacent municipalities: Spring Lake, Wall, Spring Lake Heights, Belmar. Belmar was the only one to respond. They submitted a response to the RFP that they would be willing to do it. They wanted to get some data and come up with a figure that they felt was appropriate as a cost for them. They did respond with a 25% charge of their overall police budget based on their current fund numbers, plus the cost of our specials. So if we use less specials, it would be less. If we needed more specials, it would be more. Thank you.
Tony Pacelli, I'm the president of PBA Local 50. As I watched this presentation, I became increasingly frustrated with some of the things I was seeing. Most of my frustration was based on how subjective and helpful some of these numbers were to your specific cause and what you prefer for Lake Como. I respect your title as a retired chief. I don't mean this in a respectful way, but you don't know the town of Lake Como based on numbers and stats. Okay? As far as I see some of your numbers, you're using, Councilman Higgins, sorry, you're a teacher, correct, principal? I'm seeing it as you're using numbers for police officer salaries based on equivalent if you were saying, oh, well, we have to hire 2 or 3 new teachers, and we use Councilman Higgins' salary. And that's just simply not true. These guys have worked for, some of them like 20-something years to get to the highest step of salary. And during your whole presentation, you never mentioned that if you hire new officers, they're going to make $30,000 a year as per the contract, not the 100 and whatever you were touting earlier in the presentation. You also inflated the numbers, in my opinion, to add extra manpower that was never there in the first place. It is my opinion that Lake Como Police Department ran fine when they were at full force. It hasn't been at full force now for a little while, but I don't see the need to, for the purpose of your numbers in your charts, go from when they had the most ever at 11 to now 13 or 14, however many you had of them. So that also helps bolster your numbers. Sir, do you happen to know, does Lake Como have a dispatch center? No. Okay, so you kept referring to how you were trying to get the stats and response times from Lake Como, but you were unable to. When in fact they don't even have a dispatch center, correct? Someone else outside the agency already dispatches for them? So it's unfair for people here to think that they weren't giving you the numbers. Now, in all the paperwork I've seen from Belmar, there has been, as of today, was the first time I ever saw any kind of price in writing. Including that, I have never once seen anything that guarantees manpower. Now, again, no disrespect to your previous title, to open up a presentation with the statement that the amount of cops in your neighborhood doesn't matter to crime rates is ridiculous. It's silly. I hope there's 25 cops on my little street that I live on. The more the merrier. In fact, Councilman Carvelli just said that it was an issue last summer, there wasn't enough police in the area. So, if residents are already complaining that there's not enough police, for you to say that, in your opinion, amount of police officers doesn't matter, is also crazy. Now, again, has Belmar guaranteed any amount of manpower that will be in just Lake Como, dedicated to Lake Como?
Belmar was a participant to the discussions that were had with the state, so they are going to follow the recommendations of the state as far as the staffing, whether or not they'll have a dedicated patrol that stays totally in Lake Como or it's a roving patrol, I don't know.
Just so we're clear, so at this point that's still a no. They haven't given you any guarantees of manpower, which was apparently already an issue.
Which was an issue?
It has been mentioned in the past that manpower is an issue. Previously about last summer, and it has also been mentioned that, in your opinion, you're understaffed. Not enough to have every kind of part of the department that you would want. So I don't understand how, unless they're guaranteeing you a certain amount of officers, you're in any different position than you're in now.
The cost savings is with regards to the administration and the overlap. You know, statistically, we only need so many officers for the size of our town, for the amount of crimes we have. Whether you factor in the summer or not, I know Mr. Rigodella had mentioned that the cost for service, that will include all the calls. But the issue is it's a 24-hour day, 7-day-a-week department, and that's where our costs come from. And yeah, whether you want to disagree whether the salaries are high or not, that's what they're being paid, and you have to have the relief factors and everything else built in. The savings comes through because of that structure is already there in Lake Como, so we can technically reduce the amount of officers overall, but still get the same patrol, if not better, because of the infrastructure exists over there. Like I said the last time, I don't think anyone in this room, including the PD, sitting down to say, hey, let's come up with municipal borders, would think that creating a town of a quarter square mile and 1,700 residents is a good idea, and to make it self-sufficient. And to say that we can't fix it and look to contract for Belmont services like we do for many other services without problem, I just don't think that makes sense. With regards to, as far as not having problems and the department functioning well at the past level, I disagree. And you and I have had discussions about overtime issues, and that's what's been a problem. At the old levels, as far as I'm concerned, the levels that have been for the last few years, we would continually have overtime issues because of the size of the department, because of the small size. So one guy calls out, overtime issue. Guy goes on workers' comp, overtime issue. We can't backfill, we don't have the size. The advantage of going with Belmar is you're going to have a bigger department to do that.
Now, in the presentation you mentioned calls for service. I think you mentioned there was 1,560 calls for service. That was just 911 calls? Because you know, I know it is only, as the mayor said, a quarter square mile town. A lot of people like that quarter square mile town and don't necessarily want a big town. One of the things that I know a lot of these little towns do is they will actually call the police department landline directly and not necessarily use the 911 option to call in crimes. I know a lot of people find that it might be sometimes quicker to call the line directly. According to our records, we have almost 6,000 calls for service. So your charts that you bring up here are also conveniently helpful for your cause. When you break it down by numbers, only people that call 911, not almost 6,000 calls that they go on. For other people calling whatever the landline number is, not necessarily just 911. You know, again, in my opinion, a lot of these numbers are working in your advantage to get rid of the police department.
Tony, where'd you get that 6,000 number?
We compared the stats a couple meetings ago. I think it was just short of 6,000 calls for service.
Came from dispatch?
They're all calls, officer initiated and everything.
From where? Where's the number? Is it from dispatch? Did it come from?
Our old CAD system and the new CAD system.
So, I mean, officer initiated has been, in this presentation, played off as not a big deal, but that could mean an officer driving down the street and seeing a fight, or seeing that guy throwing a bottle. Just because he's the one that initiated the call and someone else didn't call 911 on it, doesn't make it irrelevant. Like I said, a lot of these numbers, in my opinion, are very helpful and one-sided. And I just hope that, you know, numbers are numbers, they don't lie. If we could get an actual proposed budget and what it would actually cost, I know the budget doesn't come out for a couple months yet, but it would be fair for the residents who stand to lose their police department to actually see solid numbers on paper, not hypothetical doomsday numbers of what their taxes are going to be raised, and see actual numbers before anybody makes any decisions here. I think you owe it to them because, like they said, once it's gone, I don't see it coming back. And you got to exhaust all options before, you know, that happens. Thank you.
Officer Howard, how are you, sir? Michael Bolberg, First Vice President, PB 50. As everybody knows, Lake Como is currently patrolled by one officer to a few officers a shift right now. You said before that, and I just want to stress this, you said before you haven't been guaranteed an officer will be assigned to Lake Como 24/7. It could just be a roving patrol through once every couple hours. When right now you have a police officer in Lake Como 24/7. And you're willing to give that up?
There, with regards to the staffing that was recommended, the Belmar Police Department under the deal as rural staff is appropriate. I'm not concerned that there's not an officer sitting in the quarter square mile. Right now, the Belmar Police Department, in Belmar, when they respond from headquarters, and I know you brought it up last week with the response time, there's places in Belmar that are further away from homes in Lake Como. There are actually homes in Lake Como closer to the Belmar Police Department than there are homes in Belmar.
I don't really agree with that.
Lake Como starts on 16th Avenue. There's homes on North Boulevard in Belmar
Mayor,
that are
I'm
further away.
pretty familiar with Lake Como, but if you don't have an officer assigned to Lake Como, and it's a roving patrol, and that roving patrol assigned to Lake Como is down on the Main Street Bridge, true or untrue? This is a question I'm going to ask you. Is the response time for that officer responding to a serious incident, is the response time going to be greater coming from the Main Street Bridge or coming from Lake Como headquarters?
Be greater coming from the Main Street Bridge.
So you're putting your residents' safety and
Security
security in jeopardy?
Yeah, we're talking about we're using doomsday hypothetical numbers.
Well, you're doing it with this whole presentation, sir. So if you're going to do it, your residents need to see that.
Okay, so you're doing the doomsday scenario too. Right now, our officers transport to Belmar headquarters for police for alcohol tests. So we do have officers out of town at any given time during every day of the year.
So you can play this scenario out as many times as you want, but it goes both ways. For instance, I've been looking at the schedule because it's a problem. And we have times in the summer, there's no regular officers working. July 18th of last summer, Saturday night, there was only specials on duty.
I don't see how that's possible because I believe under 2A, please correct me if I'm wrong, you have to have an officer on duty. It can't just be a special.
My review of the schedule shows that you can follow up with Tony Pacelli of the PBA. He's looked at the schedule, and I believe they're admitting that there's issues with that.
And then another question I had is you brought up earlier that you value the opinions and the input of the residents.
Correct.
Why won't this be put to a referendum? For their opinion?
No one said it wasn't going to be. The problem,
Being
the problem,
up here, it seems like you guys have all made your decision already.
no one's going to anything. Please, before we finish, we want to get to the meeting, we have to do the regular meeting. No one's voted on anything. And it's admittedly, it's difficult and frustrating, certainly from your position, the PBA's position, that we have to do it every 2 weeks is when we get information out. So this is continually moving along. There will be a budget process that we have every year. The community can give input, you can give input, and the council will take that into account, and they'll adopt a budget based on that. Like I said in the past, we don't get people to respond, so we do what we feel is appropriate. The reason it's moving along is because statutorily we have to. If the referendum were to fail, the backup plan has to be in place that we would go to ballot. If it were to pass, fine, you want to pay for that cost of policing, whatever it may be, whether it's less than that number, so be it, you're going to pay for it. And if you're comfortable voting on that, so be it. But nothing's been done yet, and I apologize for the time it's been taking to get the numbers out there, but it's just not an easy process. As we get it, we'll get it out.
I just want to stress to you that there should be a real open dialogue between the mayor and council and the PBA. So we could try to hash this out to provide the best service possible to these residents.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
I would like to respond to that.
Yes.
Because I take exception to something.
Okay.
This is your second meeting here.
Yes.
It's the second time I've seen your face.
But I've been following everything.
Right? I've been sitting with these police officers since last summer. So don't sit there and tell me what I've decided, haven't decided to do at this time.
You know what? I'm going off of what I see and what I understand.
You've been here twice. You've seen me twice.
And I've heard about it.
And I've had an open dialogue with these police officers.
Well, then why did it
where
stop?
they've stopped. I don't know, you tell me. The union stopped it.
They stopped it.
And it's the same discussion we had the last meeting. The union decided to stop negotiations. So don't sit here and tell me that I am not having a line of communication.
We're open to negotiations.
You are now.
We've always been.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Council.
Yeah, please.
I just want to clarify, people are saying we're not working off of real numbers. I've got 3 or 4 budgets in front of me, they're real numbers. We're giving you real numbers that we've projected. And so to say we're not working off real numbers, we have real numbers, they're not made up numbers.
Anthony Tillman, 10 Pulse.
I just had a follow up with something Mike said, if you don't mind. Part of the issue with the dual process of the council contemplating voting on the matter directly without going to referendum is there's additional costs. So for every day, we've had contemplating essentially a no cap date of March 31st. For every day we go past that, it goes up. So using the $1.9 million number, the police department's roughly $40,000 a week. So that increases that referendum number, and that's part of the reason behind it. Sorry.
Anthony Tillman, 10 Pulse, police officer in Tacoma. I just want to touch base on a few things. You claiming that the low crime rate is a bad thing. I grew up in this town. To me, a low crime rate, and I would assume everybody here would equate to, or is a positive thing for policing. Not anybody here in this room would want to live in Asbury or Camden where there's a high crime rate, where the police are doing more stuff. I think that's a testament to our job of what we're doing, that the crime rate is low. to be honest. In addition to that, with the numbers on here, I see that the $1.9 million is based on police salaries in addition to special officers, correct?
Correct.
And then the number that you have on for Belmar, which is I think $3.5 million, that's minus the specials. Is that correct?
The number for Belmar was, I think, 914 plus, or 8 something plus the specials at 989 would be the cost of the Belmar contract.
Yeah, but the number I got today from the proposal Belmar listed, it was minus the police specials, the special officers. So the budget that their number that you have up there is only including the budget for the regular police officers, not the special officers.
I'm sorry.
Oh, because it says, as Belmar would charge, they come up 20%, 25% of the annual non-beach police. So,
Yeah, so I'm sorry, the 25% was of the Belmar police budget from the current fund, which is their non-beach revenue. So they take their portion of their beach revenue and they pay their, I believe it's the specials that pay with that. So we would not be considered into that.
all right, just want to touch on the two things. You said July 18th, that there was no regular police officer working. Is that the date that you're?
That's the date that I looked at, yeah.
Okay, there, Sergeant Ansora was working that day.
Okay.
So, we
I
have
have,
discussed that.
this is the schedules that I looked at that state, that Louise provided me.
Right, and the last, just touch base with the, you saying that the Lake Como police officers are the one that ended negotiations. The meeting that we had when he stepped in, after he left, you proposed a final offer, said that you guys are done. So, to say that we ended it is not.
Asking to open up again. You said, we'll meet with you, and you guys canceled.
We wanted to reschedule because we wanted, you claiming a number of $643,000. We would like a more accurate number so we can discuss some kind of budget or concessions if we need to make it.
What I was referring to, Tony, was the meeting that we had with your PVA president showed up at the meeting, and we talked about sitting in a room and rolling up our sleeves and go over whatever. I actually believe I took all of your cell phone numbers at the time. You contacted me and you said you wanted to meet, and I said contact Louise. Louise contacted us as a committee and said they want to meet, and then got back to us 2 days later and said, nope, they canceled. I believe, and I don't know if this is a fact, but I believe it was on the advice of your union, but I don't know.
You don't know. I needed to reschedule, and like I said,
Okay.
in addition, we would like to have a solid number, which is yet to be determined. It's fluctuating from 643 to 4 something to 1 something. I think that's a relevant.
643 was over the cap in September when we had a budget meeting and Fred said that Kevin was leaving. So Kevin had put in before this meeting came out that he was leaving, and Fred said, we need to hire 2 officers. And then we had a budget issue, and Patty Fagan came in. So we, at that point in time, in September, we were going to exceed our $150,000 pre-budgeted for overtime. We were going to exceed it by additional $100,000 back in September. The number went down because it looks like overtime stopped.
So
And two officers left.
When did that number go back down?
Right around the time all this was announced.
Okay. I have the paper that you filed 30 days ago that we received from the Civil Service Commission. That the number that you provided was still $643,000.
No, the number, I thought you meant the overtime went down. The overtime number went down. The overtime number went down when all this was announced that we were putting out an RFP. The numbers early, when that was submitted, that number was still 643. It is now down.
Do you have a specific number?
It's around 350, 343, above the cap.
Okay.
With the Belmar proposal. Again, we're down, guys. You have to increase that to hire it. You have to increase it to continue. If you want to go 11 cap referendum, add the time now that we're paying to get there. So you had a date that you would end that would keep the number lower. You want to continue it on. You got to pay for it. We can argue this to the end of time. How many? Not enough. Too much. Belmar's bad. Lake Como's good. We are here because we can't pay it as it exists. It's simple as that. I tried last year. You and I had a discussion. I thought I was getting the whole PBA last March. You were the only one who showed up. And I told you we were in a bad position. You told me we could put in parking meters.
You requested a meeting between myself.
I said that, I meant the PBA, everybody, because I needed to convey to you how dire the situation
It was conveyed to me that they wanted to meet with you off the record, just with myself. It was between me, you, Louise, and the chief.
No, I was told that we're only.
All right, okay, listen.
You're right.
It doesn't matter. I want to be able to note that having a safe community is a positive thing. Having a low crime rate is a positive thing, not a negative thing like it's being portrayed tonight.
Understood.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, David Schneck, 302 C Street in Belmar. About the specials, you have like 13 or 14 specials that you hired during the summer, and they're
We put a list on it, I think it's higher than 16 total.
And,
You don't have to use it.
So Belmar is going to charge you out of your municipal budget the cost of however many specials you want.
Under the proposal, we would pay for whatever
Right.
specials they used.
Yeah, and you need specials during the summer because of all the beach goers and all the extra crowds. Basically because of the beach being here, right? Wouldn't you say?
I mean, I guess the beach is part of it. I wish we had our own beachfront. but-
Yeah, well, that's the thing is, just some information, and you can, use it however you want, but just, so you should be aware, Belmar pays all their specials at the beach utility from the middle of May until the middle of September. They've been doing that for several years now, and, I assume they plan on continuing that practice. So, if you hire, 12 or 13 specials, you're paying Belmar out of your municipal budget into their municipal budget, but Belmar pays their specials out of the beach utility. And, some people have raised questions whether it's legal. Former Mayor Pringle wrote a letter to our town attorney about it, but in the meantime, that's what they're doing. So when you pay Belmar, out of your municipal budget for your specials, Belmar is paying those, he's going to be paying for your specials, I presume, out of the beach utility. And the justification that they give for that is that it's because of the beach that Belmar goes so crazy during the summer and needs all these all this extra policing, and therefore it's legitimate that the badge buyers, the people who buy beach badges, should pay the cost of having all the extra police protection in Belmar during the summer. And I'm just thinking that you're really in the same boat. Lake Como's a beautiful town, but the reason why you get so crowded during the summer is because it's the same beach that makes Belmar crowded during the summer, and they're, able to, or at least for now, they may be stopped, but at least for now, they're able, they've been paying for their special police officers out of the beach utility budget, not out of the municipal budget. So, and if you have them, pay them to have specials in your town, I presume they're going to be paying them not out of our municipal budget, but out of the beach utility. So, I have no opinion one way or the other on, but I just thought that's some information that you might think is relevant.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
As I listen to everybody here tonight, I kind of get this feeling that it's like all of you guys against the PBA. And that's unfortunate because I know that's not what it's about. I feel bad for the mayor and council to have to make this kind of decision. But there's always things we want. We all would love to continue to have the police department. They do a great job. But the fact is, we're talking about $1.9 million, half of the budget, an average salary of $103,000, and add on top of that $12,000 to $18,000 of overtime. When these people retire, the overtime is added into their salary, so their pension is based on not only just their base salary, but
No, it isn't.
You're wrong. You're wrong.
Is that different than, because I've worked for the state police 34 years. Overtime is calculated in.
No. Based on your base salary.
Okay, I stand corrected. So my question is this.
Cynthia, just make sure you speak to the mic, Rick, if you're going to speak, you guys speak to the microphone, everything can be recorded. Please, everyone's welcome to come up and talk, just don't shout from the back, so we get everything recorded.
So I feel, I mean, these are men that are protecting and serving this community, and we appreciate the work that they do. They do a great job. But I think it's come to the point where it's breaking the backs of the citizens of this town. And, you know, when I was listening to one gentleman talk about, you know, we want to negotiate with the PBA. We're talking about 10 or 11 officers that this town of 1,700 people have to fund. I just don't see how it's financially feasible. I would love to keep the police department. Everybody wants their own police department. It's a difficult decision you pay, but when I'm looking at these kinds of numbers, 41 Part 1 crimes over the entire year, it's just an astronomical budget. And I'm listening to the contract that was negotiated, and I think they said compounded at 7.65%. I think anybody in this room would love to be getting 7.6% raises. We don't get that in the state. We get 0% for a couple of years. So I mean, times are tough. There's unemployment. It's a difficult financial economy to be in, and it's a difficult position to have to say, no, you know, we can't afford the comps. We want the comps, but I just don't know that we can continue to do it without raising taxes, to continue to do it. The unknown, you know, I can't say, are we going to be that much more unsafe not having somebody in a quarter square mile of town? I don't know. I feel like it's a lot of scare tactics and a lot of, you know, like if they're not there in the corner, what's going to happen? Well, these 41 crimes in a year, what does that really, what were they really? I mean, this isn't Camden, it's not Patterson, it's Lake Como. I live here, you know, I just think that, I just think we've gone past the point where we can really afford this. And I just feel bad because I don't want the police to think it's like we don't value them. We do. I just don't think we can afford them.
What I'd like to do now is just take a 5-minute recess to allow us to clean up the presentation. We will return. No, yeah, man, we can come up and take one more question.
I'm just wondering, is the presentation available online? Like my eyes are bothering me and the green writing is really hurts me to read. Is that going to be available to us? Okay, that would be great.
Thank you.
And I got a couple questions about when was the referendum made? April 19th.
So yeah, April 19th. You can read the local finance.
So my question is that I'm a part-time resident, so is there time to change our residence so that we can vote?
I honestly don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah. Is there a way anyone to, I can ask? 29 days? Okay, great. And could you were talking about the budget, and you went from 16 to 18. So if a referendum is passed, do we know what, I mean, like, you know what I'm saying, that what would 2016 budget be like if it's passed versus not passed, and the same question for 2017? Yeah.
If the 2016 passed with the referendum, it would be a 29-cent increase. For
2016.
for 16.
And then what would you project for 2017?
In 2017, we would project another 2%, so that would be 2% on top of that 1 million. Almost 1.1 million.
Okay, thank you. I just want to say, I am a part-time resident, and I live in Montclair most of the time, and the crime rate there is terrible. I am actually a crime victim there, so I'm very sensitive to policing, and I do think, I've been here 9 years, I can tell you every year in the summer, it's better and better and better. I don't think I made one, I think I made one call last summer, and my first year here, I called every weekend 4 or 5 times a night. So something has really improved. I am not here to say anything negative about the Belmar Police. I just hope no matter what happens that we stay the way that it is now, because it's really been delightful not to have to call the police every night, every weekend. And I also just want to say to all of you, I appreciate the hard work that you're doing. I do think this is a really thankless job. In my career, I had to do the budget. Numbers are numbers. They don't change. It's not like an opinion. Math is math. So I just want to thank both the police and the council and the mayor for everything that they're doing. And I hope we come up with a solution that would work for everybody. To me, it would be great if Belmar would hire some of the police. That would be ideal, but I realize that's up to them. Thank you.
Motion to close the public portion. Mrs. Zarnecki, is it relevant to the presentation? Because we're going to go into the regular meeting and there'll be public portions there as well. Yeah, sure.
It's Zarnecki, 1921 Markham Ave. Ditto on that. We appreciate the police. We appreciate everything that you guys are trying to do here. There's been made reference to a referendum. However, as far as referendum is concerned, is that to increase, obviously that's to increase the 2.5% levy cap to get us out of the hole where we are. Now, is that open-ended? That'll get us out of the hole where we stand right now as far as our department? Or is that going to be open-ended to increase the department's strength to what was projected earlier as far as increase in the number of officers, detective, et cetera, et cetera?
Again, and that was debated tonight, you can have a vote, you can raise the bare minimum, which I think is a bad idea because then you're back here next year and the officers are going to suffer through the same thing. You need to build in what you need to run this town. I can tell you personally, I'm not going to acquiesce and do it on a bare bones schedule or anything that I don't feel is appropriate as far as policing or any other thing. There are other services in town that it's my job to make sure that we provide. Policing is one of them. There's other things that the citizens are, that it takes. So you have to have a number that is enough to, in my opinion, settle it once and for all. So if you want it, you got to pay for it. That's the bottom line.
Okay, so basically it'll be open-ended.
The budget will be proposed and then ultimately adopted by the council, just like we do every year. That budget will undoubtedly be in excess of the 2% cap. How much so will depend on the discussion by the council and the input from the residents or anyone else who wants to come and speak. That's the procedure every year. That's not going to change. I can tell you from my personal opinion, I'm not going to allow, I don't have a vote, but I'm going to ask the council that they build in a budget that appropriately staffs the police department and funds the rest of the town. Because I'm not willing to continue to fund the police department at the expense of everything else. It just doesn't make sense.
Again, I appreciate everybody.
The workshop.
All in favor? All right, thank you everyone. Public